Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is Saturday, June 19th, 2021. It's Juneteenth. And they finally declared my birthday a national holiday. I've been waiting for this for a few years now. And today is my birthday, and I'm 77 today. And they finally made it a national holiday. This was quite an event. Now, next year, my birthday will be on Sunday, Father's Day, which will also be Juneteenth again. So, quite progress has been made this past few years here, in spite of everything going on. I haven't been on for a few weeks, and what I'm doing today is I'm just going to call it a little sort of basement diary, because we're in my basement studio over here. And I haven't been on the air for a few weeks, and the reason is I've had two family weddings to attend to. Two of my grandchildren got married, the youngest and the oldest. The boy, the youngest, got married in Florida about a month ago, and the oldest, my granddaughter, was married in Rockaway Beach, Long Island, New York, just last week. And the hat I'm wearing, I'll turn it this way a little bit. You'll notice there's one city on that side. What city was that? That was that was San Francisco. And this side over here is New York. So she had the hat made for me for the wedding, and it's a really nice, beautifully made straw hat, and it's got the New York City on one side and San Francisco on the other side. Definitely bi-coastal, and there's no doubt that we are bi-coastal over here. We're heavily connected to the East Coast and very, very happily connected to the West Coast. So the two weddings were sort of, let me just segue for a minute to the weddings. There are two weddings, and I was raised Catholic, so the events in the family are very Catholic. And the wedding in the South in Florida, it was interesting. There's more churches in Florida than I've ever seen anywhere. There were some blocks we drove down where there were literally 4 churches on a block. And my daughter started pointing this out as we were driving around, and it was just remarkable. We were in a town. It was probably the only place in Florida where there's a hill, and it was called Mount Doro. I think it was Mount Doro. And it's right in the middle of the state, not far from Orlando. It's a gorgeous little, cute little town with a marvelous little place where we stayed, this marvelous resort area in front of one of these great big lakes with alligators in them. And it was early May, and remarkably, the weather was just marvelous. It had to be the one week in Florida in the late spring, early summer where we actually had good weather. It was almost like we were in Northern California. It even cooled off at night. Florida was interesting. It wasn't, I went basically from the airport to Mount Dora, and the time in Mount Dora was very pleasant. The two things that I came away with about the church was it seems like the more biblical the Catholic groups get, the more fundamental they get. So the more they're reading the Bible, and I think they're reading the Bible more in the South than they are anywhere else. At one point, there was a reading in the Bible which called for the slave to be holden to his master. I was almost waiting for the woman being created out of the rib. We got a little bit of that kind of a lingo. So I was exposed to the more fundamentalist part of the Catholic Church at that time. Usually I'm there for the Christmas Mass when I go back east for Christmas, and that's all I have to put up with. I got a little bit more this time. The second marriage, second ceremony, second wedding was in Rockaway. And that was a little bit more what I was used to, more of a good Irish Catholic priest there. And my granddaughter and her fireman husband, very much in love, very exuberant. And I was the ring bearer, and my wife, Grandma, was the flower girl. So the grandparents were the flower girl and the ring bearer. And another surprisingly nice week for weather. We were in New York in late June, and other than one miserable day with the 80-degree humidity, the rest of the time was fairly reasonable. And the wedding was very nice. It was at Rockaway Beach. And part of it was on the sand where we took lots of pictures, and then there was a big party all afternoon. The church was well air-conditioned. People had to go out and get coats and blankets and things. It was about 65 degrees in the church and about 90 degrees outside. And we we went around Manhattan. Interestingly, getting to the wedding was a real bear. The plane I took from SFO to Newark was an hour and a half late leaving because it had a flat tire. It was another an hour and a half. It got up into the air and immediately came down because the ailerons weren't working. So we were about 4 hours late getting into Newark Airport. So naturally, I missed my ride to bring me to the wedding party, so I had to take a cab. So it was $160 for a cab to get from Newark Airport to Rockaway. The fare was about $80, and the tolls were over $40. Over $40 in tolls between the Verrazano and the Turnpike and about 2 or 3 other bridges. So the whole experience in New York was it's always interesting, and we visited the Little Island, a new thing that they built on the west side, the lower west side of Manhattan, around 14th Street. They built this 5-acre park on top of these tulip-shaped pillars that they put out into the Hudson River. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I haven't been on the air in a month, and my schedule is going to be changing, and starting next week, I'll be on a better schedule. I'll be able to put these shows out more regularly. So hopefully, starting next week, I'll be able to get 2 or 3 shows out. Now, I've been doing a food show every week, and I've been trying to do a news show every week. I'd like to do a show where I just talk about some of the stories in my life, such as I mentioned my growing up as a cocktail lounge kid in a bar in Manhattan that's taken over by the cops and the mob, and how that led to the Stonewall riot. I got quite a few stories actually around the bar scene in Manhattan in the 50s, and my uncle and the connection to the mob, and Albert Anastasia's assassination, things like that, and the theater next door where Mary Martin did Peter Pan. I had a very interesting childhood, no doubt about it. Later on, as I'm working for AT&T, I wind up leaving AT&T after 10 years, and I write a 17-page letter of resignation accusing them of lying, cheating, and stealing. And there's quite an interesting story around AT&T, leading to there was a day in the mid-90s when all telecommunications were lost in the 3 New York airports and the stock exchange. Actually, more than that. Hundreds of thousands of circuits were lost. But the main institutions that were affected were the 3 airports and the stock exchange that had to be shut down. And it all had to do with one person cutting one wire and deregulation. And that's a little story I'll get into also. And I wanted to talk about my involvement with the health food industry and creating a brown rice and tofu sandwich, building a tofu shop. And that story sort of leads over the years into my involvement with various people and how Whole Foods came to be, and how the unethical, unscrupulous, cutthroat business practices of Whole Foods are totally in line with the cutthroat, unscrupulous business practices of Amazon. And you could see why. They were a marriage made in heaven, a natural marriage made in heaven. So mostly I just wanted to sort of reintroduce myself, tell you what I'm doing. I'm back. Starting next week, we're going to have some show. I'd also like to do a show. I do a set of yoga every night, and I got a ton of books here and a lot of practices about philosophical and spiritual considerations and various practices. So I'd like to do a yoga show. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. The big thing for me to do with that is I need to learn how to put the audio, a separate audio, over the video. So if I took a video shot of myself doing the yoga, I would want to talk over it after the set. And I haven't quite learned how to do that. There's nothing on the wall in back of me. There's nothing on the whiteboard over here. I didn't put together any graphics today or anything up. I just wanted to quickly get a little show out. And it was a bit of a turning point, surprising. in general, the news hasn't been terrific, and Trump has still been yelling about losing the election, and democracy is threatened all over the country, and the white nationalists are rearing their ugly head. And in a sense, as systems come to an end, the worst aspects of them get more and more and more accentuated, and in a sense, that's where we're at. Well, in line with that, as the bad happens, the good is also happening, and how they're balancing each other is maybe what the whole focus of this is going to be as we go along. When I mentioned Trump has been contesting the election, well, a big thing he said was that something is going to happen in August, and they've been predicting, these far-right QAnon crazy conspiracists, that something's going to happen in August and he's going to get reinstated. Now, this has been sort of an ongoing meme that's been coming out of the far right for weeks now, months now, actually. Whether or not anything that happens, I think it's something we need to keep our eyes on. We need to focus on it. Back in, after the election, back in November, December, as Biden won the election, Trump lost. And we were all sort of happy to see Biden was going to be put in as president. You could see back in early December that things were not going to go real smoothly. And first we had to get all the votes certified, and then the states had to certify. And there were these benchmarks along the way. And every time there was a benchmark, everybody felt a little bit relieved. And I kept saying, yeah, wait till actually the inauguration. Wait till after he's actually inaugurated. Well, we all saw what happened on Inauguration Day, January 6th. So most of the intelligence networks had information about this, but somehow some of it was ignored unconsciously, some of it was ignored consciously. In either case, we had what we had, and where we're at today, which is why the Russian QAnon Republican Crazy Party is attempting to restrict voting rights as much as they can. And well, things are moving along in that direction. On the positive side, David Brooks just the other day had a interesting editorial where he talked about how we were at a turning point, and it was the COVID crisis has sort of shaken up all the political and economic institutions in America, and we're going to have a rebirth and a regrowth of all these new meritocracy coming. Now, if you read David Brooks, as I usually do, I agree with much of what he says, and he always throws a zinger in there that I disagree with, and he does it purposely. It's how he writes. He writes in a zinger just so to keep the other half of the reading public engaged, and he definitely keeps me engaged. Now, I disagree with 90% of what he said this particular time, but what he did say was true, is that the COVID did shake everything up. And the social, political, economic institutions are all in a sort of a state of mild chaos right now as we're emerging. Now, whether we return to the old normal, whether the new normal becomes the old normal or not, that's about where we're at. The new normal for David Brooks is not going to be the new normal that most of us were really looking for. But anything can happen. And that's for sure. Anything can happen. Interestingly, I was flipping through some of my old books the other night, and I ran into a copy of Lilliput. Let me show it there. Lilliput. It's the Spirit of America. It's sort of a spiritual, political, spiritual kind of magazine. And I found this on the top of a pile of magazines. I wasn't even sure what year it was from, but I noticed Wendell Berry, who I've read over the years extensively, was one of the lead authors for the articles in the magazine, and it's a special issue, the United States of America, Reflections on the Destiny of the United States, Light, Darkness, and Hope. Well, I looked up Wendell Berry in the table of contents, and I find the article about him, which is an excerpt from The Unsettling of America by Wendell Berry. And I ran into, on page 40 here, in the article, and I noticed that I've got like a half a dozen parts of the article were highlighted in orange, which I do. Now, it turns out the article goes back almost 6 years to 2005. And what I have highlighted here is what's being sold to us every day is the American way of life is mostly a cheat and a lie. an infantile dream of endless consumption, endless novelty, and endless play. It's a pacifier for the ego to suck on. It's bad for us and bad for the earth. I'm not going to go into any more of the article. That sort of jumped out at me. The American way of life is a cheat and a lie. It's a pacifier for the ego. And as we are starting to return to normal, especially here in California and New York, there were scenes from a couple of stadiums just the other day with full stadiums. People are out. People are doing what they were doing before, which was watching a lot of these huge sports events, which in a sense is the pacifier for America. And that's sort of what I thought as I was watching these events. I said, wow, we're all going to go back to normal. We're going to start filling up the stadiums. We're going to start returning to, well, let's face it, it's the Colosseum. The big sports events are like the Roman Colosseum. And we may not be killing gladiators or killing Christians nowadays, but we are, and we may be paying the people on the field there quite a bit of money to do what they do. But we are definitely creating the entertainment for the crowd. Meanwhile, the discrimination increases and the housing problem is increasing at a rapid rate, and the climate deterioration is getting to be, you know, sort of ludicrous. And as we enter the worst drought on the western United States, it was in the paper the other day, the worst drought since 1500. 1500. So we're talking about a 700-year period almost. Remarkable. So there's some people saying there isn't such a thing as climate change. Hello. Why don't you spend the weekend in Palm Springs and find out whether there's climate change. There was a tiny, two little things I wanted to mention before we get off the air. We're 16 minutes into it right now. When I mentioned the thing about the biblical Catholics earlier, what was in the back of my mind is what had just happened within the last 24, 48 hours. The Catholic bishops, who are a relatively conservative group, extremely conservative group, and getting more biblical by the day, they would like to publicly prevent Joe Biden from receiving communion because he is politically in favor of abortion. Now, I was raised Catholic, and at the time when my daughter was conceived, my mother-in-law would have liked to have had an abortion. And in fact, she was holding the pills up at one point, shaking them in a bottle. Well, we didn't have an abortion. We didn't go for an abortion. We had the baby. Neither one of us wanted to do that. Having said that, we both agreed that the woman should have the option of doing that. It wasn't necessary. It might be a religious decision on somebody's part, but in general, it's up to the individual, I think, to make the choice, and it shouldn't be dictated by the state. And the religious group should not be coming in telling the state what to do about this. If you people that are my age remember when Kennedy was running for president back in the 60s, the big worry, big deal they made of this, was that if we elected Kennedy as president, because of his Catholic background, the Pope and Rome was going to be dictating policy to the United States. Never happened. Kennedy was president. The Pope did not dictate policy. There were very few Catholics on the Supreme Court. Nowadays, the majority of the Supreme Court are fundamentalist, very right-wing Catholics. The whole Catholic group in America is getting together to take a political stand against Joe Biden and his stand on abortion. And if they do, if they officially go through with this, which I think they may have actually done today, it will more than likely cause a major split, I think, in the church in America. Just like the Southern Baptists split from the Northern Baptists many years ago over the definitions of white supremacy or critical race theory. Similar thing here today over abortion. So that's something to keep your eye out for, and I was really disappointed in these bishops doing that, and I think they stepped over the line in creating in becoming very political where they ought not to have been. There's a little quote from a book. I'll give you one last thought for the day, and then I'm going to head off to work. And this was the back of a meditation magazine called Mindfulness, and was a quote from Thich. We have a lamp inside us, the lamp of mindfulness, which we can light any time. The oil of the lamp is our breathing, our steps, our peaceful smile. We have to light up the lamp of mindfulness so the lamp will shine out and the darkness will dissipate. Our practice is to light up the lamp. We light up the lamp with our breathing, our steps, and our peaceful smile. When we said our breathing, means the consciousness of the breathing, the consciousness of the steps of each movement you make, and the smile on your face as you bring joy to other people. Peace, patience, persistence. We'll see you next week, and hopefully we'll get this together and get better as we go along. Okay, thanks for joining me today, and happy birthday, Paul.